Hello and welcome to Lead at Any Level Live, coming to you every Monday at noon Eastern via Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. My name is Amy Waninger, and I am the Inclusion Catalyst. I'm also the founder and CEO of Lead at Any Level. I want to thank you all for joining me today. If you're just tuning in, please let me know where you are in the world and what platform you're joining me from in the comments, and hopefully I'll be able to see those. Sometimes they come through and sometimes they don't, but I'd love to know where you're joining from and where you are in the world. Today, I have a very, very special guest for the show. And I want to tell you just a little bit about my friend Angel Henry. So Angel is the author of the book, Dents in the Ceiling, which I should have right next to me. Hold on, I have it right next to me. As a matter of fact, right here, Dents in the Ceiling by Angel Henry. And she is the president of Angels Speaking. And she works with companies and organizations and individual managers to help them be more inclusive, to help them understand the intersectionality of their workforce. And she also does some one-on-one coaching and group coaching with Black women in the workplace to help them be seen and move forward in their careers. So I'm really excited to introduce you to Angel today. And let's just bring her up. Hold on one second while I figure out how to do that. Angel, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
I am so glad you are here because, first of all, I always enjoy our conversations. But second, this is, I think, you had me on your show not too long ago. And so it's always fun to return that favor. So now I'm looking at you and not at the camera, but I can't not look at you because you're my friend and seeing you makes me happy. So usually on Mondays, what I do is I share with my audience some strategies and skills for inclusive leaders to be more inclusive. And, some of the skills that I talk about on the show are things like being able to manage change effectively for yourself, right? So you can lead yourself through change so then you can help others through it, giving and receiving effective feedback, playing to people's strengths, building relationships across difference, creating a learning culture, paying attention to hiring. But I know you do a lot of work in this space as well. And I want to ask, what would you add to the mix of what leaders need to know or do, or what skills they need to have to be inclusive?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for asking that. You do some phenomenal work in terms of engaging those that are in the C-suite and leaders in terms of helping them map out exactly what you said. Like, hey, here are some big ticket items and ways that you can grow your workforce and mature your inclusion journey. And what happens is then you really need to bring in folks like myself that can boots on the ground to make that practical. Because when you say those words, people kind of are like, oh, that seems like a lot, right? Like, oh, that's a big change. And it is. It really is. When you talk about shifting culture, that obviously is a big thing. So I take it and distill it down, particularly for individual people managers, and really say, okay, how do we take this and do it iteratively and incrementally, right? Like changing your mindset and, oh my gosh, I have to be this different person and I have to show up differently for all these different people that I talk to and manage. And it's like, well, hold on, let's just take this day by day. Talk to me about your normal cadence, your normal meetings that you have, your team meetings. How do you normally run them, right? Whether it's in person, hybrid, or remote. And we'll talk about that. And I'll say, okay, great. Have you thought about, let's consider, let's add to. And it could be something as simple as doing a check-in, right? I tell people I try to really model it for them too in meetings, is to say, hey, just check in with your people. You can do stoplight colors. You can, do some little fun game. You can do something remotely. If you're in person, you can kind of go around the room and say, hey, what's the weather like in your life right now? Is it stormy? Is it rainy? Is it sunshiny? Is it partly cloudy? All of that. And it's just a way to check in with your people and kind of really get them centered and back into the, present moment, right? And folks really help that because it really shows that the leader, the person who has the positional leadership, the manager, the director, the VP that's running the meeting, it shows that they have empathy and that they care and that they realize that, yes, you are a whole person that's coming to work. And I realize that you may have had a traffic problem, or you may have had daycare issues, or you may have, been up all night caring for a sick relative, right? Let's check in, talk about that, and then we can move into work, right? And you have to have time for that. And it's just little practical tips like that I love to give people managers, that it doesn't overwhelm them, right? So I'm just like, hey, on your calendar, just put a list of your team members' birthdays, and then send them a shout out. Maybe their work anniversaries, right? There's a lot of automated systems now, Workday and things like that, that'll just send you your team members' work anniversaries. You don't even have to remember it. But for you to go the extra step to give them a shout out, or send them a card, or some little token that says, I see you and I care, really goes a long way to making that inclusive journey stick and make it real.
I love how personal you make this. And I love that you talk about empathy as a skill, because empathy really is a skill we can develop over time, just like we learn how to use Excel spreadsheets, just like we learn how to, code in HTML, just like we learn how to, speak in front of people, right? We can learn, even if it's uncomfortable, like learning new things can be, we can learn to be more empathetic.
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about that process and how you help people on that path?
Absolutely. That's my favorite. So how much time do we have? Okay. So my favorite is I utilize what we call the Agile Mindset Framework. And I'm an IT girl, Amy, as you know, we have that background in common. So 20 years in technology and software development. And there's a project management technique in terms of how to get work done called Agile. But when you really kind of go through, after you kind of weed through the ceremonies and the nits and nats and the roles and responsibilities, and you really get to the foundation and you get to the heart of what Agile is about, it's really a way of looking at things. It's really about just taking something big, distilling it down very small, doing a few steps over a week or two period of time, and then really being intentional about taking a pause to say, hey, did that work or not? So here's a great example, phenomenal example that I see with that companies do all the time. Organizations will spin up ERGs, or employee resource groups, or inclusion groups, right? And the most typical resource groups that you'll see are ones for women, and maybe one for Hispanic or African American, right? Based on ethnicity. So men and women will come together based on coming around an ethnicity or a race, and they'll have speakers and events and leadership developments around specifically talking to their race or ethnicity. And then you'll have a group that's the same, talking to women, right, about what it's like to be maybe working in a male-dominated environment, and you're a female. Or you identify as female. So what does that look like? What kind of coaching and feedback do you need to get, and all that good stuff, right? But, oh, wait a minute. If you really took a step back, right, HR groups, DE&I officers, and really follow that through and get feedback from those that are in these groups, you might realize that there's a gap. You might start to see to say, oh, wait a minute. Women of color, women who identify both as female and as an underrepresented race or ethnicity, oh, they need specific coaching and development and mentoring and sponsorship that's unique, that they're not going to get from just being in a woman's group or just being in an African American or Hispanic group. And so what we like to call that is that feedback, and we call that retrospection, right? That's a big word that just says, what we just did, what we just implemented, is it working? And that's the piece that most organizations miss. And that's one of the things that I love about the Agile Mindset Framework is it gives folks that remembrance of, wait a second, not only are we going to implement something, but we're going to do our due diligence to get feedback to see if it's working or not. Are we hitting our target audience? Are we hitting the metrics and the measurements that we really want? And if it's not, that's okay. Let's figure out how to course correct. Let's try something different, because we're all learning. It's not a failure. It's just, oop, we missed the mark. That's okay. Let's course correct and try it again. So I love those two pieces, because there's been a flurry, Amy, of activity that's gone on around training and groups, and let's get up a diversity, equity, and inclusion office, right? There's a lot of roles and a lot of activity has been happening. But is it really making a true difference to our employees? And right now, I venture to say that the answer is no, not consistently and not across the board, and not statistically significant advancement. If we really want to make a true dent across the board, we're going to have to stop and measure and admit some mistakes and do some course correction.
I'm so glad to hear you say measurement too, because I want to make sure I wasn't on mute. Sorry. I'm glad to hear you say measurement, because I think the activity piece is an easy place to start for people, right? You can see all this flurry of activity. So clearly we're doing something. But a lot of times, people will come to me and they'll say, well, here's what we're doing and here's what we want you to do. And I say, great. How are you measuring whether or not this is successful? And it might be something as simple as, we want you to come speak on a Tuesday. And I'm like, that's awesome. What do you want me to talk about? And how are you going to know if I did a good job? And if it's, well, people will show up. Well, that doesn't really matter if I did a good job. That's how well did we market it on the front end, right? And if people like it, that might be a measure. But especially in this work, if we say things that are true, that are hard to hear, and people don't like it, well, now we failed. If the measure of success is, did everyone like it? So I like to know, what are we really trying to accomplish here? And the way you implement this with an agile mindset or an agile approach is, let's do a little, let's see if it worked. If it worked, let's do more of it. If it needs to be tweaked, let's fix it before we do a whole bunch of it. Right?
Yes. And maybe I'm being naive, but I'm thinking those with the purse strings are going to love that approach, just because you're not putting all your eggs in one basket, right? You're not signing a big check and then putting your fingers, hoping that this works and hoping that it meets it. No, we're going to invest, and that's the key word. We're going to invest in this training or this initiative or whatever it is. And we're going to put our measurements up front. We're going to put that success criteria right up at the very beginning, and it won't be an afterthought. And that way we're a bit more mindful and intentional about the outcomes that we're trying to seek, right? And the value. That's the part that I love the most, is to talk to folks about the outcomes and the value and what they're trying to do. And okay, is what you just proposed to me really going to hit the nail on the head with this one? Is there something else maybe that we can do that's a bit more deep, that's a bit more intentional, a bit more mindful? And here's a great example of the conversation that I often have. Similar to you, someone will come to me and they'll say, hey, I got a copy of your book. I want you to come to speak to our women's ERG group. And my lesson learned, something that I had to learn, that I had to share with those folks, is actually, you might not want me to come speak to your women just yet. As much as I would love to, it might end up doing a disservice to your organization if I come speak to your women's ERG right now. And they're like, well, why? I'll say, you probably want me to come and talk to your people leaders first. You'll want me to come and talk to their supervisors before you want me to talk to the women. And they're like, okay, why? Well, this is what unintentionally will happen. I'll come and I'll talk to them about concepts like personal board of directors and how to get feedback from your supervisor and how to advocate for yourself. and how to negotiate for, it doesn't always have to be extra money, right? It could be for an opportunity, a stretch opportunity in a different organization, or a bonus, or, more team members, or more training, or I want to lead, a conference, I want to speak at a conference. Whatever it is, I'm going to give them a bunch of tools, right? We're going to do a 45-minute jam-packed session, and they're going to walk away with a notepad full of actions. And let me tell you, when they show up to their first one-on-one or development conversation with their direct supervisor, and they are prepared, and they have the language, and they have the ask, and that supervisor is, if they're not ready for that, and it falls on deaf ears, or there's no action, guess what we just unintentionally created? A very unhappy employee. And over time, if nothing is done about it, and their requests for feedback, their requests for stretch opportunities, their requests to show up and to add more value goes unheard and is ignored, then eventually they're going to vote with their feet, and they'll be out the door, right? And they may end up taking a couple of people with them.
That is so true.
Caution when you have me come and talk to your women. I say, actually, let me get a hold of your people managers first, so I can give them the tools to be able to receive, and it can be a true partnership on both ends.
It is so important. And managers really do set the culture in the organization, because that's where most of the day-to-day direction comes from. It's where most of the unwritten rules of the workplace come from, right? It's where most of the tiptoeing and tap dancing comes from. If you're feeling uncomfortable at work, it's where most of your support and strength comes from if you're feeling very comfortable at work. And so managers really are kind of the long pole in the tent for all of the inclusion work that we do. It has to start at the top, because you need the budget, and you need it to be a priority. But if those managers never get the memo, then you've got a lot of unhappy employees for a very long time.
Yes.
So, Angel, I want to thank you so much for being here. I try to keep these under 20 minutes. It's hard when I have a guest, but hopefully we can do this more often together, because I love working with you, first of all, but I just think what you have is so valuable. And I know that there are going to be so many ways for us to partner in the future. Where can people find you if they are looking to have you come talk to their people managers first and their women second, or if they're looking for coaching in this area?
Absolutely. Yes, I am excited. My team is growing, and we offer two major service offerings. One that's going on right now, actually kicks off today on LinkedIn. I want to reach out to as many HR leaders and chief diversity officers, or those that work in the DE&I space, as much as possible, to just remind them that Q1 is staring us in the face, right? So you've got Martin Luther King Day, Black History Month in February, Women's History Month in March. Now is the time to engage myself and my team and my network, Amy, in which you are very much a part of, to show up and to be a part of your inclusion journey, right? Whether it's talks or workshops or a longer engagement, we would happily entertain all of that at info@AngelsSpeaking. That's two S's in the middle, AngelsSpeaking.com. And then also too, we just wrapped up a Make Them See You last Wednesday, where African-American women, or women who are from the Africa diaspora, who happen to work at American companies, are coming together. And we're creating that leadership and that tribe, and really trying to cultivate that community. So if you're interested in that, when we planned on doing something around January, February for just that population, again, reach out to info@angelspeaking.com, and we can get you the interest form and information there for that. But yeah, now is the time. If you are an HR leader, or you're in the DE&I space, now, this week before Thanksgiving, is the time to connect with Amy and myself and our network, to make sure that your Q1 is locked and loaded. Because
so let's talk about what happens. People come back after the holidays, January 3rd, January 4th.
Yes.
And they look at their calendar and they say, oh no,
Oh.
we need an MLK Day speaker next week. What are we going to do? And then you get somebody maybe who may or may not be available, right? Who may or may not be any good. And we don't want to do that, right? We want qualified Black speakers on MLK Day, first of all. And then we want to make sure that they are paid appropriately for their labor. So let's get that out there. And so you need time to negotiate contracts. You can't just invite your buddy from the YMCA to come over and give a talk. Doesn't work that way. Okay. Then these same leaders at the end of February look at their calendar, they say, oh no, it's Black History Month. Who do we know? And they typically don't know a lot of people. So yes, before the holidays is the time to lock in your speakers for Q1, because you want to make sure that you have the best people available and that you've negotiated good rates for yourselves, and good compensation for the people that are coming in to help you out, make you look good. So be sure to call Angel and invite her in for your Q1, Q2, and Q3 for Women's History Month events. And it is so important to get out there and get in front of this. So thank you, Angel, so much. I am so honored that you were here with me today, and you are welcome anytime. You make my job so easy. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So before we go, a note to anybody who's watching. First of all, every weekday at 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, you can catch a new episode of Leader Tips. Now, last week, I told you I was going to talk about 5 advantages of inclusive organizations, and I kind of lied because I didn't post them. So that's what's coming this week at 4 p.m. I know, it's really bad, right? This is the life of an entrepreneur. I got distracted and it just kind of all fell apart. But this week, for sure, at 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 minutes or less each day, I'm going to go through 5 advantages of inclusive organizations, 5 benefits of being an inclusive organization. And on Thursday at noon Eastern, you will want to join me on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube for the Including You video podcast. This week, I am talking to Carolina Vieira. She is from CareMax, and she is talking about community partnerships. And this is really topical because Carolina is in Southern Florida, and part of her work in the healthcare space is building these community partnerships, which came in really handy when the hurricanes have hit, because they're able to reach into the community very quickly and offer support. Now, we recorded this interview before the hurricanes hit, but you'll be able to, I think, connect those dots pretty easily between what she's talking about in that interview and how they're reaching out and providing essential services and needed supplies in their communities that have been hit by the hurricanes this season. So you'll want to join me for that on Thursday at noon Eastern. If you miss it on Thursday, or if you prefer your podcast in audio form, be sure that you're subscribed to Living Corporate. Living Corporate is an audio podcast produced by the Living Corporate Media Network. It is phenomenal. I am but one of many shows that they produce, and it's available on audio podcast on Friday through them, wherever you get your podcasts. So thank you all for being here. Have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you every day this week, for sure this time. Thanks. Bye.